Okay, so a new Photoshop document here, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a new layer to work on, and with the brush tool, a nice bright colour, and take the opacity down a bit just so it acts more like an actual pencil. Okay, so I'm going to start with the head shape here, so a nice elongated oval. I want to create a kind of long, tall, slender character here. So this head shape is nice and long, so I'm dropping in the guidelines here for the hanging the features on. And with the torso, I'm kind of angling the shoulders up a bit, just kind of contorting the pose somewhat. And you'll see here the torso, again, a very simple shape, just a rectangle. At this stage with the design, I'm just looking at very simple shapes to build the outline of the character. So keeping everything nice and simple, keeping in mind form and silhouette, and just trying to keep things nice and clean, you know, very clean cartoon design here. Okay, so we've got this arm that is swaying in front of the body. I'm thinking of it almost like an elephant's trunk, kind of brushing the floor as he shuffles forward. You know, I'm thinking about these slow moving zombies you see in films. They kind of shuffle along, they creak, it's, you know, the arms swing to the side and so on. So very uneven. And with this arm, I just wanted to create something a little different. So I've torn it off at the elbow, but in a very cartoony fashion. You know, we're not looking at too much gore and things like that. And you'll notice the bone on the end is quite large. If you look at the opposite arm, you'll see that that bone couldn't possibly fit in that arm. But we're working with cartoons here, so we can afford to exaggerate and just have fun with it, put a bit of humour into the design. You know, it's all about drawing cartoons, so we want to keep them fun and interesting. So this hand here, that was just a circle with some rounded rectangles on the end there. Okay, so just dropping in the back leg there. So we're keeping the feet quite large, just to add to the overall character. You know, he's kind of shuffling along, so I'm keeping the extremities quite large. And over with the ears here. On this right one, I decided to pull it away from the head just to add, you know, a bit of add to this kind of decomposing effect here. And dropping in the features very roughly, so you want to keep the expression nice and zombified. So heavy eyes, kind of mouth that's all contorted and groaning, and so on. So we're just working very simply at this stage, plotting in these very first details that we can then build upon when we go into the next layer and start refining the design. So this is the first stage, and the next thing I'll do is create a new layer and start to refine this rough sketch. Okay, so I'm just taking the opacity down on this layer so I can trace above it and creating a new layer. I've locked the previous layer so don't accidentally draw on it, and I'm just going to refine this design now. So I've chose a different colour, so we've gone to blue. So, you know, if we're using red, we're just going to kind of muddy up what we're drawing on top of, so choosing a different colour just makes it easier visually. So at this stage I'm just thinking about tidying up all the parts, and here also I can make some changes. You know, nothing's set in stone at the moment, so I can come in and change anything I like. So I just want to make everything a lot neater for when we eventually ink the piece. Sometimes it can take 2 or 3 layers to get your piece nice and ready for inking. Okay, so I'm just making sure I go over everything as close as I can, but I'm not tracing entirely. I think if you trace entirely, you kind of lose a bit of the looseness of the design. So I'm just kind of following along as close as I can. If I go off a little bit, it doesn't matter. As I say, along the way I'm kind of fixing as I go, so things will change. We're just using the previous layer as a template now, and we're still thinking about the design. You know, it doesn't stop here. We haven't drawn this first design and thought to ourselves, right, that's finished, we just need to trace now. I'm still developing the character. Okay, so I'm just tracing over everything, and occasionally I'll turn off the previous layer just to get a quick glance of how it's looking overall. you know, with the previous layer we've got lots of sketchy lines and it kind of blurs a little bit. So creating this layer and drawing just a bit neater over the top, we can see overall how the character's developing. Okay, so you can see here with hands, I've gone for the kind of very cartoony 3 fingers and 1 thumb look. I prefer that for most cartoons, especially for something a bit more simplified and fun. You know, it looks better on a cartoon to me personally. So you'll find that I usually favour the typical cartoon hand there. Okay, so just sketching over the head again. And you can see also that torso is drawn through the head. I drew through that to ensure that both shoulders were even. Just a little tip there to make sure that both sides are lining up nicely. So just tidying up as we go, just using the eraser tool there. And just thinking about the pose of the mouth. So here I'm just adding in some teeth, kind of having this bottom set jutting out in this very zombified manner. You know, it's a very contorted mouth. You know, teeth wouldn't stick out like that. It's just not anatomically correct. But we're working with cartoons, as I say, so you know we can get away with just exaggerating everything, and it looks okay because it's a cartoon. And this expression here, I've got this brow furrowed deep down, and the eyes are going to be very dark around the edges. They're going to be very heavy underneath, so I'm just adding this little suggestion of baggage under the eyes there. You don't need a lot of lines, just a couple here and there is enough to suggest the overall look of the character. Once you start adding too many lines, you're going to clutter up your design, and everything's going to kind of fall apart because you've got too many details and so on. Okay, so just thinking about this design here now. So I just want this ear literally coming away from the head and hanging on by the lobe, and there's, you know, kind of this icky goo that's attached to the head that's stopping it come off completely. So as I say, with these cartoons, I don't want to be over gory or nasty with them. I want them to be a little bit gross to look at, so you look at them and think, oh, you know, that's pretty gross. But I'm not being overly graphic in a sense. You know, I'm not going to town with, you know, making lots of gore on these pictures. I want them to still be a bit fun. Okay, so just finishing off the top of the head here. He's going to be a bald character, so I'm not putting any hair on this character at all. Okay, so far that's looking reasonably good. I'm happy with that so far. And also you want to think about the state of your zombie. You know, you get at what stage is he? Has he just turned, or has he been a zombie for months? So think about that when you're designing the costume. You can see here we've not really got any tears as such in the clothes. All we've got is the arm that's come away, and we've got the tear in the shirt there. So the trousers are fine. So, you know, I'm kind of thinking here maybe he's a freshly turned zombie. So play around with those ideas, especially when you come to colouring. You can add grime and grunginess to the overall costume, and the skin tone too. You know, you can play around with different tones. A flesh tone that's just turning green, or something more bluey green and purple. Okay, so just adding a few little lines there, just curved off the bottom of the shirt there, just made it a bit of a nicer curve overall. So overall, not looking too bad here, nice and clean. Okay, so at the moment I'm just taking a look at the arm here. So I've duplicated what we have already on a layer, and I'm just thinking about this arm that's swinging in front of the character. It looks okay, but I just want to try another idea. So I want to have this hand kind of reaching out and grabbing towards you. So I've duplicated the layer so I don't mess around with the original artwork. I can always go back and keep the original, or even have two versions. So creating the two layers just, to me, makes sense. I don't really want to ruin all the work I've done if it doesn't work. So just to have a backup copy is always a good idea. And make sure that you save your work as you progress also. It's very important. You don't want to lose all that hard work. So here I'm just blocking in some shapes for this hand that's reaching out. So I've got these kind of big fingers here. So it's a good idea to just get some hand reference when you're drawing things like this. So you'll see here again, we've just got the typical 3 fingers and thumb hand. Very simple shapes. You can see I just drew an oval in there and just added on the rectangles and just filled in the blanks. And here I'm just trying to work out the position of the arm. And all this is on a new layer. So this is above the blue character. So it's a separate layer. So I'm not messing around with the layer beneath. So the 2 blue characters are both separate layers. I just like to work this way. I can keep everything neat and tidy, and if something doesn't work, I've not lost anything. I can just delete a layer and I've still got the artwork left. So on this one, I'm back to the character here and I'm erasing this arm entirely. So, I think I'm going to commit to drawing in that arm now. So I'll come back to this later and block in the torso again. So I'm just resizing a little bit, just trying to get a bit of perspective in there. So I'll kind of shuffle around a bit, just play around with placement and see what works. And that's using the transform tool in Photoshop. Okay, so I'm just duplicating this layer again. So I've got 2 copies of the new hand, and I want to play around with the angle of the entire arm here. I'm happy with the hand, but I just want to play around with the arm a little bit. So I'm looking at bringing this arm up a bit higher in this version. So I've got one that's a bit higher and the previous one that's just a little bit lower. So I've literally just played around with the angle of the arm from the shoulder to the wrist. So just very loose and rough, just trying to figure out what works. So just swapping back to the other one. Okay, so the new one is the one that works for me. Again, this is a good thing about a program like Photoshop. You've got this opportunity to quickly on the fly change things. I mean, with pencil and paper, you can obviously erase lines, but you're committed then. With a program such as Photoshop, you can create layers and just make all these changes on the fly. If they don't work, you've not really lost anything because you've got backup artwork and so on. So I'm just blocking in now. So I'm kind of happy with where this hand is. So again, this is on a new separate layer. I'm dropping this hand in. So the shapes are still very simple. Just wanted to add a bit more perspective to the character. The original was fine, but it was just an afterthought. I just kind of thought about this zombie reaching out. With the nails here, I'm just breaking them off a bit. So they're all roughed up and look a bit nasty. So just play with that. They're just literally little cuts in the shape there. Not too much detail. Hands are always quite difficult to draw, so it's worth practicing with drawing hands as much as you can, especially if you're going to start drawing the 3